everyone, and welcome once again to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about The Dark Knight Returns Part 2. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Oliver Queen, and I was stranded on an island, and my father... Oh, wait, that's wrong. Sorry. Yeah, we're talking about The Dark Knight Returns Part 2.
Yeah, so we did a podcast on Part 1. We both liked it quite a bit. Now we're up to Part 2. And the first question I have for you, Eric, is do you feel like these are standalone films or one movie?
I don't know.
I don't either.
I've watched Part 1 a couple of times when it came out, but I haven't watched it really since. It felt a little bit different. It felt far less restricted than the first one felt, because one of my things, when they announced this, is I'm like, well, if I don't get President Reagan, I'm gonna be angry. And I got President Reagan, and I didn't think I was gonna get that.
And he was pretty well straight off the page. I didn't feel like they really let anything go there.
This is basically the second half of the book, whereas the first one I felt like in some places they were kind of. It makes me wonder if in the first one a lot of the things where I was like, oh, they weakened that, maybe they just cut it for time, like maybe it wasn't really weakened, because they didn't seem to blunt any of the punches here.
They really didn't.
But I wanted to watch both of them together before I did this, and I didn't get a chance. I'm going to be really interested to see if you can watch both of these as one big movie. Yeah,
me too, and I really want to. What I wonder is if you watch the first one... and then watch the second one right after, if it doesn't feel like that violence kind of just keeps ramping up from the beginning. Because watching them separately, it feels a lot like the second one's just really violent.
Yeah, well, and the book plays like that too. Each one is kind of, bigger than the last. I was really impressed just with the politics and that they kept everything. I was really impressed with Reagan. They've got that scene that I love where it's where they ask Reagan about Batman, and he goes, well, that's not really my jurisdiction. That's really more of a state affair. It goes to the governor. He's like, well, that's really just Gotham City. And I trust the mayor. It cuts to the mayor, and he's like, well, we just picked a new commissioner of police, and I don't really want to tell her how to do her job. I love that sequence. I thought that was I really liked that they had that. I think they nailed the incredibly incompetent cowboy that Miller depicts Reagan as.
Yeah, and somehow on screen it felt more blatant than it did in the book.
I had the exact same thing with a couple of things throughout this movie. Is like watching it and hearing it made me think that certain things were a little bit less subtle than they were in the book.
It seems so much more heavy-handed, and I think that part of the point that I think Miller is being not subtle on purpose in the book, and so it's okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not really saying it's a problem, but it does feel a lot weirder hearing it.
Oh, absolutely. The one point that because I watched this film with my mom, because I watched the first part with her. There was a point where she actually laughed when it cuts to Reagan and he's in the radiation suit.
Yeah, that was
funny. He's like, oh well, we just won this country. Apparently the Russians are bad losers. And it just cuts to a nuclear missile being hurled at America.
The part that I thought was the silliest with Reagan's speech. Well, maybe that was the most silly, but the other part that really
like he was in a spacesuit.
That's so funny. The other part that really jumps out at me is when he says, protecting our own assets. I mean,
yes.
I'm sorry, interests. When he says we're protecting our interests, and I'm like, yeah. I don't think most presidents would ever be as obvious enough to accidentally say that.
Never messed up like that.
No, he didn't. Reagan didn't mess up like that. But again, Miller's being obvious to prove points, and that one felt like that was one of the ones that really stuck out to me, where I was like, oh, that's really obvious when you're hearing it. Yeah, really obvious. Like, anybody watching that and going, well, I wouldn't vote for him again if he could run a third time.
I can't believe I voted for him 5 times.
Were you surprised that they took the chick with the swastikas straight off the page?
I had heard somewhere that that there was an interview or something where like, well, it's not going to be exactly the comic, we're kind of gonna, and I'd assumed that she was going to have a jacket with the swastikas in the same place, like a military jacket.
I remember you even telling me that when you said, the one thing they won't do is they won't have her bare-chested, and they totally did.
I was shocked.
I was shocked, too. Yeah. Now, one thing I noticed, going back and flipping through the book again a little bit, is that they don't also show her bare-bottomed.
Right.
They left that out. I guess the chest was okay, but it would be too much to do both.
Well, the one thing that I noticed,
unless I just missed it,
is that this is going to sound weird, but they never move.
Yeah, I know. I feel weird talking about that. I thought the same thing. It's hard not to kind of wonder how far they'll go with something like that.
There's a point when she's firing a machine gun where I was like, okay, I feel like it would be skeevy to do it, but it looks weird to not.
I think maybe that was their compromise, don't you?
Yeah.
That they said, okay, maybe we can get away with this, but yeah.
And it's not like it's drawn that way in the book or anything. She's about as unsexualized as can be.
She is, sure.
In fact, I watched this with both my girlfriend and my mom kind of separately. And first of all, they both laughed at when she first showed up. And second of all, they both asked the exact same question, which is that a guy? And I was like, no, that's a girl. She's a butch girl, but it's a girl.
Yeah, well, I wondered the same thing the first time I read the comic. When I first saw her on a panel, I wondered if it was a guy until I kept reading.
You know what I don't think works as well in animation as it did on the page?
Oh, what's that?
Batman disguising himself as an old woman.
That didn't work as well. You're right. I thought the same thing.
It was just voice.
It was too far-fetched. I mean, like, when he takes that mask off and he's Batman again, I'm like, I don't know how you made yourself smaller, but good job.
Well, and that was somebody else's voice. I felt like it being somebody else's voice made it. I almost felt like, and it didn't happen either time, but like I was waiting for somebody to ask me, like, who's this old lady? Like, it doesn't immediately come across that it's Batman. I don't know. I thought it felt weird in the film. And there were certain things that they kept that work on the page, and they don't not work in the movie, but they feel sillier even in animation.
Oh yeah, like what?
When Superman meets with Batman, and he has that. Okay, he's got the big open shirt.
Can I say I laughed out loud at that? And I remembered it from the book, but I had the same thing. I was like, boy, you can't animate this and not make it look like a Disney film. Like, I'm ready for Bambi to run out or something. Like,
well, what I loved is, it's not just they kept the design. It's that they had the eagle fly down and land on his arm, and it looked so silly. And like, I know the panel. Like, I know what that page looks like. And just seeing it animated, it looked ridiculous.
Yeah, it did. And yet, it's hard to complain because they were completely serving the novel. I mean, they did all that panel for panel, and then they have the eagle fly down and pick up the mouse, and I mean, like, it's just like it was.
And I think this is the most adequate Superman they've ever gotten.
You think?
I feel like when they get Superman, he's either really good or, like, I really don't agree with him. Like, I really don't like the choice. Here, he never had a line where I was like, yeah, that's Superman. Like, there was never a delivery where I was like, yeah. But there was never a delivery where I was like, ooh, that's not Superman. I felt like he was just adequate. I felt like he was really adequate.
Yeah, well, it wasn't distracting, and I think that was something with really the voice choices all the way through both of these movies. I never thought about the voices, and I always think about the voices. Well, with the exception of the Joker, but that's because that's an actor I know, and I want to see how he would do. Everybody else, I found myself just constantly just kind of. And I said this with the first movie too. I just got sucked into this. I'm having a bit of a difficult time like reviewing this. Just a critical review because I kind of just sat there and enjoyed this movie.
I had a similar thing. Well, one of the voices I want to touch on that we talked about last time is Peter Weller. Um, with Peter Weller, I had most of the same reaction. Where like almost every single line, I'm like, well, that's not how I read it, but it's
But
fine.
it works, yeah,
It,
sure.
except for when he's rallying his troops, he should have been a bit more boisterous. Like his voice should have been louder.
Fair enough.
Um,
I hadn't thought
like
about it,
he's just kind of like tonight we're going to ride. I was like
but
I was like I would have been a little bit more dramatic.
somebody in the back's like, could you speak up a little bit? I didn't hear that.
However, and that's kind of how I felt about pretty much everyone. Everyone throughout the film was like, well, that's not really how I heard it in my head, but it works. Except for the Joker. The Joker is exactly what I hear when I read Frank Miller's Joker. Um, Frank Miller has my second favorite take on the Joker. I think it's just a fascinating take. And even people that don't like All-Star Batman Robin seem to think his take on the Joker and that is interesting. I think he's just got such a different take. And it does kind of go back to that, Batman issue 1 where the Joker's not really the Joker. He's a serious guy who just kind of looks funny.
Yeah, I
Um,
enjoyed how soft-spoken he was in this.
yeah,
He's so
I
understated until he starts doing violence, and that is a really, like you said, interesting take on the character, and makes a whole lot of sense psychologically.
well, and I was shocked by. This is gonna get touchy, but given how many shootings we've had recently, I was
Yeah.
shocked that they let him just run through that carnival mowing people down.
Well, I was also very surprised by how violent the scene at the talk show is, because it's more ramped up than the book.
I I love that Conan O'Brien is David Letterman.
Yeah, that was
Um,
funny. I caught
but
that too. But yeah,
I
isn't there more blood in that scene in the movie than there is in the book?
I don't remember. But part of it is because of the way Miller draws. Like I could see him, like the scene where he slits the guy's throat with the mug, and it just shows the blood splatter. I don't fully remember, but I could see that being depicted on page and not being incredibly gory.
Maybe that's
Because
what
Miller has
it
that
was.
cartoonier
Yeah.
style.
Well, and
Um,
also Miller would have done that in like one panel.
yeah, exactly.
And we got to see it from all these different, we got to see it from a couple angles, and we got to look at it longer, and that kind of thing.
But the thing that shocked me the most about this film, even more so than just seeing Reagan, because even with Reagan they kind of compromised, never called him Reagan. Um, although I'm not sure if he got called Reagan in the book. It's
But
been a
that's
while since I read
okay,
the book.
because it's obvious who he is.
I know, but
That would be like complaining if Watchmen had never called Nixon Nixon. You'd be like, well, it's pretty obvious who that is. Look at his nose.
but I was
One time,
shocked
I
that
wish
they
I
kept-
wish he'd said Nancy. Just one time.
I was shocked
Nancy.
that they kept all of the homosexual overtones with the Joker. Because when Batman shows up, almost every single thing he says is a double entendre.
Yeah.
And what I was really worried about, because there's no voiceovers. I was really worried that my favorite Joker line was going to get cut, but it isn't. It got worked into dialogue. There's a line in the book where he says, "I don't know how many people I've killed, but I know you do, and I love you for it."
Yeah.
And in the movie, Batman says, how many people? He's like, well, I don't keep track. And he's like, I do. And he's like, I know, and I love you for it.
I love how he delivers that, and I mean how he delivers
Yeah.
everything is fantastic.
Yeah,
That's absolutely my favorite scene in the whole movie. I mean, as dark and terrifying as he is, I gotta say that maybe this is a bold thing to say.
The way
but
he dies is horrifying.
I was gonna say this. I want to say that out of every screen version of the Joker I've ever seen, this is probably the most terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. This is the scariest.
It's the scariest, and I mean,
Well,
like
and
that
I
might
think
be
part
those
of it
might be
is
fighting
that-
words against Ledger. That's a movie with a lot of scary themes. But I mean, man, and I'm not saying that Rises should have, or no, Rises. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that Dark Knight should have done this. But like looking at this movie, you see him just nonchalantly walking up and shooting people.
Well, and I'm not in any way saying that, like, oh, well, this performance is necessarily better than Ledger's.
No, I didn't. No, I'm not saying that. But I found myself thinking I would have been more scared in his presence.
Well, and I think a big part of it is that this Joker, Miller's Joker, one of the reasons I like Miller's Joker so much is it feels the closest to a realistic sociopath.
I think that's maybe that's kind of what I'm getting at a little bit. And that's why I said psychologically it makes so much sense that he's so soft spoken so much of the time, and then he just kind of when he's ready to go, he just jumps up and nonchalantly starts mowing people down.
Yeah.
And he's a good manipulator because of the way he handles his therapist.
When he runs across the carnival, he mows the people down. And then Batman hits him with the Batarang, which they totally kept. I thought we were gonna get some like tricky like camera work there. I don't remember what he says right after he gets hit with the Batarang, but it's a great delivery. Where it's not that's not nice, but it's something like that.
Yeah.
And then he runs in the Tunnel of Love, which is something I never connected the dots on in the book. Is that their final fight is in the Tunnel of Love?
Oh, good point. I never thought of that either.
But and he does the same thing there. He's just shooting people as he's running through the tunnel. Also, again, something I didn't think about in the book, but I just thought was funny in the animation, is I never thought about how little water is actually in those things. Like when you think about like when you go to like Disney or like anything like that where you're on a little boat, there's really not that much water. And I never thought about it.
It's interesting because I thought about the whole Tunnel of Love thing, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but like maybe finally I've just seen it one too many times. That setting in a lot of especially older movies is used as a really scary place a lot.
Well, it's dark. You're alone. You're isolated.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a really good like horror kind of spooky setting, and it makes me never want to go in one of those.
I've never seen one. Have you ever actually like seen one?
See, I'm going back through my mind now. I'm not sure I've ever seen one.
Maybe people are just so scared of them they just stop making them. We haven't touched on it, but I liked Oliver.
I liked Oliver also.
I thought he was a lot of fun.
Again, he was right off the page. I thought. I mean, he was what I remembered.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing is, again, I don't have a great deal to say about this movie because so much of it is just, well, it's what was in the book, except there's not any voiceover. Let me ask you about that really quick. A lot of people
voiceover didn't mind me as much this time.
A lot of people don't like that there's no voiceover, and even through the second one, and through this part, and again, watching them together will be really interesting to see how this holds true. I felt like so much more of the story was in what was going on visually that I didn't need it as much.
Yeah.
Whereas with the first movie, I felt like there were some ideas that weren't communicated through for what Batman was thinking and feeling, because it's the first part of the story. And it's interesting that it splits up so well because it's not really two different stories, but in a way it kind of is, because Batman kind of goes through this character arc in the first part and then it sort of like solidifies himself by the second part.
Well,
and
it's almost like the first half.
Yeah,
is Batman coming back, and the second half is the last Batman story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I ever would have thought of that if I hadn't seen it split up like this.
No, because I've always thought of it as a whole.
Reading it as a whole, I never would have thought this would be the story that would make sense for them to split up like this. But they obviously had a game plan. They were like, oh, this is 2 movies. I thought they were doing it just to try to get it all on there. And it seems, get it all in there. It seems more sophisticated than that. It's like no, there are 2 movies here.
Yeah. Because most of the stuff that I didn't like in the first movie, voiceover wise, is that I didn't feel like it communicated how hard it was for him to get back on the horse.
And I felt like they struggled really hard, and you touched on this last time, they struggled really hard getting some of those voiceover lines somehow into dialogue.
Yeah. And I didn't feel that way with this. This feels more like um, it kind of became a joke for a while that Frank Miller constantly gets his works adapted perfectly, and Alan Moore kept getting screwed. Like 300 is the book. Sin City is three of the books cut together. Um, this is, I think, more so this second half than the first half. It's the book. It's literally the book. Not that the first half was wrong or
And we even
really deviated in any way.
We even complained when we reviewed the adaptation of Year One that it was too close to the book.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't just that it was too close to the book. It was also really watered down, I felt.
Yeah,
But
yeah. But I'm just saying that like he does get his stuff adapted right to the
there was no
right to the
watering
screen.
down in this film.
There's not.
I'm gonna be interested to see watching it together, but as it stands now, I think this is probably my favorite of the DC animated direct-to-video films. I don't know about as a whole, but at least part two.
I don't know if I'll
Um,
find that it's my favorite to watch, but I think it might be technically the best.
well, and this is the first thing that I've made my mother watch because my mother hates watching cartoons, and I've watched a couple of these with her. Like I watched Under the Red Hood and some stuff like that, and I made her watch part one. This is the first one that I've watched with her, where she was like, you know what, that like I enjoyed that. Not that she didn't necessarily like the other ones, but like the animation, just the fact that it was animated, like it didn't bother her. She was like, that was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And she actually laughed multiple times throughout it. So, but I think this is I mean, it's going to be my favorite because of how accurate it is and how much I love Frank Miller, right? But
Yeah.
I think that this is their strongest film, and I think part of that is because they were so unrestrained in making it. This is the kind of superhero stuff I've wanted since I was 14. If I was getting this kind of stuff on a regular basis, I wouldn't care that they made Ultimate Spider-Man for 6-year-olds. Um, I want more things that are as mature as this. Maybe not as heavy-handed, maybe not as political, but on the same level of maturity as this. And I just like it was there was just watching it, particularly with the Joker bits. I was just like, I have been waiting for as long as I've been reading comics to get this.
And I really appreciate that they've gotten so far away now. And I mean, like, I might eat my words later with another release, but right now it feels like they've gotten so far away from those early days of, well, we gotta find a way to make it edgy so that we can get that PG-13 and make it for adults. They're just adapting stuff like this that already is that, and then not trying to push it past farther than that. The thing is, this almost felt R-worthy.
I honestly, if this was live action, I think it would have been.
I think it would have been. I was a little surprised that they could even get away with some of what they got away with here, and I'm not saying that makes it good.
Live action,
I'm just saying that
Bruno would have automatically made it R.
Oh, automatically. Well, I kept thinking that watching it. I was like, wow, our culture is so weird. Like,
Yeah.
as long as you don't show certain parts, you can get away with anything else.
And we got another reference to DC Comics of 1986.
Oh, you know what?
One...
That was another thing. That again, I mean, I guess it's technically kind of one movie. So, you know, I'm just complaining about something I complained with the first one. But, like, can we not show DC Comics in a DC film? Can we please just not do that? I don't like that. It bothered me. Like Justice League comics, don't do it, guys. You've got Green Arrow in your movie. Just don't do that.
Yeah. What kind of... In the first one, I kind of liked it. I mean, Crisis on Infinite Earths was in the first one, but like
I
the
thought
first
Watchmen
one,
was too.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. The first one was like Watchmen, V for Vendetta, like that kind of stuff. And I think part of it was that all of that stuff came out in 1986.
Right.
It was kind of like being like, this came out in 1986 type of thing, or this is set in 1986 type of thing. But with this one, I was like, there's a Flash comic book there. Why is there a
that
Flash
just doesn't
comic book?
make any sense. I mean, like he has characters in his
I'm
sequel.
pretty sure if I read that, I can find out the Flash's identity and go kill him.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, in his sequel, he's got characters that were in books that we saw there. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. That was irritating.
I know. Well, and they touch on them. More so in this one than the first one, but they touch on what happened to the superheroes. They talk about
Oh yeah, that's right, they do.
it. Actually, that was one of the things really kind of weird when Clark goes through that whole thing. I started seeing Strikes Again in my mind because it's like well, Green Lantern went left and went into space. I'm like, I know what happens to him. He becomes like a weird like green alien thing. Um,
I had
and
never noticed.
he's like Diana went to Themyscira. I'm like, yeah, to have your kid.
I never read Dark Knight Returns real closely. I mean, I read it through one time a few years ago before I was as heavily into comic book history and stuff as I am now, and it never occurred to me how many parallels there are to Watchmen. In this
Yeah,
book.
it's
They've
very
had
similar.
like Superman and Doctor Manhattan are kind of in the same place, and
What's really interesting?
It's really kind of interesting.
And Reagan and Nixon are played very similarly. But
Sure.
what's really interesting, and it's obviously it's all about the Cold War. But what's really interesting is they kind of came out not around the same time because that's the thing that is really interesting historically is you think that all these things came out at the same time. They really didn't. But they came out the same year. They were being worked on at the same time. It's not like one ripped off the other. Like it just happened that these two books came out at the same time about very similar ideas.
They always tell us that kind of thing. Those parallels tell us a lot about the climate at the time and what people were feeling, and why they wrote about the things that they wrote about.
That's one of the things that I think is so great about comics. And I actually think comics should be taught historically in schools because every era of comics doesn't necessarily reflect exactly what things were like, but it reflects what people were feeling. You look at the 50s comics, and it really gives you a feel for how censored and fake life was in the 50s. You look at 60s and 70s comics, you see how experimental and kind of outside the box people were. You look at the 80s, and you see just how depressed and angry people were. Like, everything is paralleled in comics, not how it was, but how it felt.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and I really think that that's just it's something that's so great about comics, and this book, really embodies it. Um, and something that a lot of people don't talk about is how forward thinking Miller kind of was. Like, and it's actually less in this film, and it didn't bother me as much in the first one. The first one, I felt like they either needed less or more of the news. I think with this one, they went for the less, and so it doesn't feel as bad, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure. I noticed that myself and kind of wondered about it because I remembered the whole news thing being kind of all over the book, and then I wondered if there was just less of that in the second
No,
half.
it
I
does.
hadn't
It
noticed
doesn't really
before.
drop out in the book. They just dropped it more, and I feel like it works better. Like
Well,
with the first one, we felt like it was kind of a weird middle ground, whereas this one, I feel like scaling it back made it
Maybe they
work
had to do
better.
that just to get more of the story in too, because there's a lot that goes on in that second half.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think maybe you got more of the lines that you were hoping for, and all the Reagan stuff and all that sort of thing, because they skimped on some of that, and I didn't notice it was missing. I mean, I did in that there was more of it in the first one, but what I mean, I didn't need it. It didn't hurt it. But I was also going to mention, it just occurred to me. I wonder if McFarlane didn't do all that new stuff in the Spawn comics just because he was kind of riffing on Miller.
He's totally riffing on Miller.
That never occurred to me until just now. But anyway,
It's a similar layout page-wise too.
we talked a whole bunch the first one about how extremely polished and well paced the action scenes were in the first one. This one was that way too. I feel like they really found their stride now. With that, and I hope we see more of that in the later movies.
I think it really started to pick up with Red Hood. I think Red Hood, they really started to figure out how to do not just action scenes, but have the action scenes build thematically and work thematically, where each fight is different than the last. And I think that really paid off in the two Dark Knight films.
Yeah, and maybe you kind of needed Red Hood first, before you could get to that, because it was all really riveting. I mean, like I said with the first one, I just really enjoyed watching those scenes. Everything was really dramatic and high octane, really fun to watch, and I felt like you had that here too. And I mean, like some parts are more fun than others, because the Joker scene, I'm not having fun. I'm kind of creeped out, and I'm supposed to be.
There's no fun in this movie.
No, that's the thing, is like that's not the right word to use. I mean, I enjoyed it, but not on like a, oh boy, I'm watching a superhero movie kind of level. It's a different sort of thing.
You're not waking up and eating cereal to watch this.
No, you're not. You're doing yoga or something first. I don't know.
I for a second.
What's that?
I thought you said yogurt. I'm like, is yogurt the adult food?
No, I said yoga, which is maybe just as absurd to say. Everybody be sure to do some yoga before you watch Dark Knight Returns.
Do some stretches, because you don't want to pull a muscle while you're watching an animated film.
I think I want to say this real quick. I think maybe my second favorite scene in the film is when, because I just like the way that they play this out, and the line delivery when Batman tells Robin that she's not fired.
Oh yeah, that was good.
It's a great scene.
Can I tell you something else that is kind of funny in the animated version as opposed to the book?
Oh sure.
Everyone gets a heart attack. At the end, I want to say there's a shot where Gordon he doesn't have a heart attack. Like, I feel like there's a shot where Gordon's kind of like looks kind of sickly, like grabs his chest or something, and then Alfred has a heart attack and dies, and then Bruce has his fake heart attack and fake dies. And in the book, it doesn't feel like that. Like, Alfred passed out, and it feels like dramatically it's connected to what's going on, and there's pages in between. But the way it's animated, it feels like Alfred has a heart attack, and then Bruce has a heart attack. And I'm like, everyone's just having a heart attack.
What is causing this? How is everyone having simultaneous heart attacks? It doesn't make any sense. It's like all the power went out, and now we all had a heart attack.
Yep.
And then you could, if that were the case, then you could rename the book, or you could rename the movie "Heart Attacks and Horses," or "Horses and Heart Attacks." And Batman on a horse is always fun. That was the part I was really looking forward to seeing in animation, and it was great.
Yeah, I loved Robin on the horse. Where she was just like really uncomfortable and just bouncing all over the place. I thought that was funny.
This is not as much fun as I thought it would be.
Well,
that's the thing. We said there's no fun in this movie, but there's levity here and there.
Oh, there's levity, and some of the levity comes from the really, really over the top, obvious satire.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it is a giant satire. I mean, I think there's moments that we are supposed to feel
Reagan
the heaviness
in a
of
spacesuit,
it.
You have to laugh.
Yeah, you have to. And, that was a scene, I just thought of this, too. That was a scene that did animate a little bit strangely from the book, and they did the best they could with it. But the whole bit where they wait a long time, they're doing those heavy close-ups on the Superman S and on the American flag before you see Reagan. That works in panels in a way it doesn't work as well in animation. Where I found myself just kept going, I found myself constantly going, why are we treating Superman like a live-action Ninja Turtle?
Cut.
Where it was like we can't show him, but by the time you finally see him, you're gonna go, oh my god, look at Superman! Like, it doesn't come off that way in the book. They're not hiding him because
I didn't feel the build up was to Superman. I thought the build up was to Reagan.
Well, no. Here's the thing. It's more of a build up, I thought, because you see him briefly in the Oval Office, Superman, but then later on, they keep obscuring him. And it seems like it's a long time before you get just a full blown body of Superman, like they're making you wait forever to see what he looks like. And that was unintentional, I think, because of the way he's drawn in the book, because he is in silhouette a lot in the book. And I also want to mention how perfectly animated
messed up post-nuclear explosion Superman is.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. That looked amazing.
Yeah, it looked perfect. That's another thing. I think this is probably the best looking animated film they've done, particularly
It is,
that
bar
scene
none.
and the Tunnel of Love scene.
Which is amazing because you and I were so worried about the animation on these movies.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Style.
No, it's not the comic, but it works.
Yeah, and then looking at it, and going back and thumbing through the comic a little bit, I found myself going, if they had tried to do a straight...
Oh, it wouldn't work. The only way that art style works is
it would have looked like doodles.
Jackie.
It would have looked like doodles on the screen. I mean, I'm not making fun of Frank Miller's art when I say that, but it wouldn't animate right.
Right. I think they got the right amount of impressionistic, because that's what Frank Miller is. He's not about the realistic. He's not Jim Lee. It's all about impressionism and making you feel the emotions through the artwork.
Yeah.
Superman looks like that, not because that's how Frank Miller wants to draw Superman, but because that's how Frank Miller wants to draw Superman to express to you how you should be feeling about Superman. It's very expressionistic, and it works really well in the comics, and it works pretty good in the animation.
I think so too. Yeah.
So some of the character models, like Superman, look a little bit silly because animation isn't as impressionistic as when you're doing it all in one style, animation-wise. It's hard to get that impressionisticism.
Well, it's a great argument for comic books, right?
Absolutely.
It tells you that there are some of these stories that some of these guys want to tell that can only be told fully in that particular medium. And trying to adapt things to screen like this is sometimes a really interesting exercise in just showing how it can't fully be done. Some people would still say that Watchmen is the unfilmable graphic novel.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, as much as I love that movie, there are certain things that don't translate because that was a movie about comic books. And here, we've got something that it translates pretty well, but I would still say that people would probably get more out of maybe watching the movie and reading the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can actually get a little bit different from the books. Like, I feel like a lot of the stuff in the books feels much more subtle than it is in the movie because it's spoken and you're seeing it. I feel like the politics felt a little bit more subtle, and I'm sure they weren't. Like, that's the thing, is I'm sure because I held off on rereading the book before watching part 1 or 2. Like, I didn't want to reread it in between. I wanted to kind of come to these as fresh as I can. And I'm sure that all of the lines are exactly what's said. When you read it, it doesn't feel as obvious. Same thing with the Joker and all of his weird homosexual overtones. It doesn't feel as obvious as it does when you hear it.
Yeah, I thought that too. Honestly, I guess I'm a crazy person, and again, it's been a long time since I read this. When you mentioned that the other day when we were talking about this stuff on the phone, I had never even thought, oh, the Joker has homosexual overtones. Like, I never even put that together.
Like, all of his lines when they're fighting are like sex innuendos.
They are, and I never caught that. And then I watched the movie, and I was like, "Oh, yep, Eric's right. There it is." Yeah, I was really kind of surprised by it. I was like, "I need to sit down and read this book again. It's been a long time." But yeah, Eric, I was fully impressed with this one, man.
Yeah. I
don't know if he watches these, but don't you think Frank Miller probably would be really impressed with this?
I don't know what Frank Miller said about this, but I know on the commentary for Legends of the Dark Knight, they said that Frank Miller was so happy when they did that little sequence from Dark Knight Returns that, like, he just kept calling them and was being like, I just watched it again. It's really good. I just want to thank you guys for making this. It's so good.
Yeah, that tells me he probably goes out of his way to watch this stuff.
Yeah, at least the stuff based on his work.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, the stuff based on his own work.
I would be
some people could care
what he had to
less.
say about it.
Yeah, I'd like to know too.
He seems to be a guy that loves to see other people interpret his stuff. And like everything else, Miller, this seems to be a pretty exact adaptation. So.
Well, yeah, I guess it makes sense. He's usually happy because people seem to have no problem with adapting Miller's work.
I feel like his stuff is so much more out there, but it gets so much better adapted than
I don't
Alan
know why.
Moore. I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
Alan Moore stuff is really like grounded and down to earth and like easy to adapt. And Miller goes so out there and so big, and his stuff is just like, yep, here's Sin City. We scaled
I
back
don't know why.
some of the animal-looking people to look like normal people, and that's kind of it. Yeah.
And that's only because they're played by normal people.
Yeah, yeah. We didn't feel like giving this guy lion hair.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I really liked it. I'm probably sometime soonish, because I don't think any of my friends have seen part 1 or 2, so maybe sometime soonish I'll sit down and watch both of them together as one big like 3-hour movie. Would it be 3 hours?
Yeah, that's
or would it be like
that's a good
2.5?
idea. No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be 3 hours. It'd be more like 2.5. I mean, it'd be kind of a little longer than your standard length movie.
It'd probably be about as long as one of the Nolan films.
Nah, actually less.
Oh, okay.
By a little bit. By just a
Well,
little
it
bit.
just lends to my argument that they should have just made this in live action as a movie. Because clearly, runtime wise, you can do it.
Yeah, but it would translate a lot better to animation.
Oh, it totally would translate a lot better in animation, and I'm pretty sure it would feel really convoluted plot wise in just like to sit down and watch a film and be like, okay, now there's this plot, that plot's done. Now we're gonna go to this plot. Now that plot's done. Now we're gonna go to this plot. Now that one's done, and then Superman shows up.
Although I would love to see somebody play that version of Reagan.
It would probably be a lot like in Watchmen with Nixon.
Or they would just replace him with the puppet from the Genesis video. Well, anyway, thanks everybody for listening to us talk about Dark Knight Returns Part 2, and we'll come back to you pretty soon with another episode of Arrow Discussions. And Eric, thanks a lot for joining me.
You're welcome.
And we'll talk to you later. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.